Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 134 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is
Max Colville.
How are you, Max?
Good, but I can tell you I did not go to the Cannes Film
No,
Festival.
nor did I, but thankfully we have somebody with us today who did. Please welcome our guest, Emilio Diaz. Emilio, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm super psyched to hear about your experience at Cannes. Was this your first time attending the festival, or have you been a repeat goer for years?
It was my first time. It was a bit of a dream of mine,
Yeah.
and I finally got to head
That's
there.
cool. Max and I have been doing Cannes coverage from afar on the podcast, I feel like since the beginning, right?
Yeah, and we had like I guess she works for Letterboxd now, Ella Kemp on at one time giving her thoughts on the Cannes Film Festival. So yeah, either we've done previews of the fest or did some little after work for it, but I'm glad to have Emilio on here to share some of his thoughts of the festival and some of the glitz and the glam and as the highs and the lows of the festival.
Yeah, I'll also say that, Max, how many years do you think it took before we started pronouncing it correctly?
Oh, I still think we struggle.
Okay, so still TBD on that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So cool. We're gonna get into Con / Can in just a little bit. Go over some of the winners for the big awards. Talk about the movies that are near and a little bit further down the road that we're going to be excited about. We'll hear Emilio talk about what it's like to be at Cannes, as well as his thoughts on the quality of some of these titles, which Max and I can only sort of speculate on. We'll also do what we've been watching to close, as always. But before we do that, figured we'd cover the headlines here. Sort of the biggest story in the movie world right now is the biggest movie in the world right now, and that's Top Gun Maverick. It held up like remarkably in its second week. I think it was like a 30-something% drop off from its like already massive Memorial Day weekend haul. So this is shaping up to be, I think, certainly one of the biggest titles of the year. The type of movie that I think a lot of people have been clamoring for, where it's like a box office success that's not a superhero movie in the post-COVID world. So Max, like, sort of what are your big picture takeaways from this, and where do you think we go from here with, I guess, both Top Gun as a property and as sort of this type of movie going in filmmaking?
Yeah, right. So I think like ultimately this movie excels because of Tom Cruise and his dedication and his director this time wanting to focus on real flying and not basically using a lot of CG and stuff for the flight. Makes it feel more realistic for sure. I think the other big argument is that where the Mission Impossible movies were kind of rejuvenating Tom Cruise's image in society at large, I think that this movie has like brought him way back. Like, I think that his image is pretty darn clean now. It not only will this fuel his success for this movie and other projects that he has, but I think even the next Mission Impossible will benefit from his improved star power from Top Gun Maverick. Emilio, I know that Top Gun Maverick did have a red carpet at Cannes. Have you had a chance to see the movie outside of the festival, or?
No, it was a weird situation where I was heading to Cannes as it was making its premiere. I did not arrive at Cannes till afterwards, and then it came out while I was at Cannes. And it's one of those things where I think often happens at festivals. I don't know if you're familiar, where just like a movie that played there premieres while you're there, and then you're just like, well, I'm not gonna watch this like at a festival. There's plenty of other movies that won't premiere for a while. Like, why would I try to watch this right now?
Yeah.
And then when I arrived back in Puerto Rico, I realized I had contracted the novel coronavirus at Cannes. So I haven't had a chance to see it even still.
How are you feeling?
I'm good. It's been a week. I feel better. It's good that I am vaccinated. So luckily it sort of went through me, but I did try to like take a week and a half off from like going outside and doing things,
Yeah,
obviously.
sure. Well, I'm glad to hear you're feeling well. I'm sorry that you got sick at what was probably otherwise a phenomenal time. But I totally know exactly what you mean. Like where you go to a festival, and I've been to just a few, but I always find myself kind of like looking at the titles I want to see, looking at their like expected release dates, and then like trying to just fit in what is the furthest away.
Right. Yeah. No, I've certainly done that many times. I've been to TIFF. It's like if something's coming out a week later, I'll probably pass on
There's so
that
many
one.
other options at that point, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm very excited by the Top Gun Maverick success. I don't know, Max, if we really talked about it, but I enjoyed the movie quite a bit. Uh,
Oh, you
I
saw
did,
it.
yeah.
I don't think we talked about
No.
you seeing it.
So yeah, I mean, I think probably to the surprise of very few people who are listening and kind of know my movie preferences. But yeah, I really really dug it, and I don't know if they're gonna do another one. I haven't really kept up with talk about that. I think it'd be awesome if they did. I totally understand if there's not really a creative reason to do so, but it was fun. It seems like people are really responding to it in a way that I didn't anticipate, especially since it was delayed. I mean, I understand why it was delayed so much, but just one of those.
Yeah. Now that you see
Yeah,
it.
right. Yeah, you get it, but it's still one of those things where it's just like that's very rarely like even close to a good sign. So I'm glad that it's working out, and hopefully, you know, it's hard to call this movie an original movie, but it does feel that way just relative to where the market is right now. So I'm very pro its success.
Yeah, 35 years removed from the original. I did end up getting to see it a second time, John. So I was impressed both times by it.
Cool, sounds great.
Yeah. I'm excited to eventually check it out.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I don't know so much about your taste, Emilio, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's one of those movies that like I have a hard time imagining like anybody not like anybody kind of hating. It's like if you're nonplussed, fair enough. But I think most people really dig it.
I mean, outside of the let's go patriotism of the United States, like military
Yeah,
um, body, I saw some arguments about that
yeah, fair.
and its glorification of war and stuff like that. But those are things that kind of come part and parcel with a movie like Top Gun.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. Cool. Okay, so some other news I'm just gonna rattle off, and I'm gonna ask you, Max, and Emilio, if you're familiar with the story, then please jump in and provide some context because they're all a little bit obtuse to me. But Joker 2, Madonna casting news. Are those the same stories or are those two different stories?
I It would be much funner if they were the same
Okay.
story, but unfortunately they're different
I'm gonna
stories.
I'm gonna like put in the GoFundMe petition for that to combine those. But tell me a little bit about Joker 2 and then Madonna casting news.
Variety and Deadline were posting yesterday that the director Todd Phillips had completed a script for a Joker sequel. They also showed pictures of Joaquin Phoenix reading said script. So it looks like they're getting the band back together to make another $1 billion movie.
Did the first one make
Makes
$1 billion? Wow,
I think it did.
that is
Yeah,
wild.
the Golden Lion winning classic.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's true. Gee
yeah.
whiz.
Best Picture
I know that.
nominated.
I
I
remember
mean,
that, and director, and yeah, obviously he won Best Actor, but I didn't. I mean, I knew it was a huge hit. $1 billion is a lot of money. That's what somebody told me once in the social network. Uh, oh no, that wasn't a lot of money. It was cool, but I think it's also a lot of money. Okay, so the gang's getting back together for Joker 2. We've got like 18,000 different Batman universes floating around. I'm pro some and anti others, but we'll figure it all out. Madonna casting news, since she's not joining the Joker 2 cast to our knowledge, I'm gonna guess, Emilio, that this is referring to the Madonna biopic. Okay.
Yes, Madonna is directing her own
Which I
biopic.
love.
Uh, yes, I've very much enjoyed this idea for a long time. As a fan of weird people doing weird projects like that, and Madonna, I don't know if she's directed a good movie, but she's certainly an interesting enough person to where I think this would be an interesting watch. But anyway, Julia Garner seems to be the person to have won the Madonna boot camp, which I don't know if either of you are familiar with.
Yes, I
Okay,
am.
no,
That was a
no, no,
very
I'm not,
coveted
but
thing.
I love it.
Oh, all
Okay.
right.
So apparently Madonna decided to have a bunch of Hollywood's just like young up and coming actresses go through like a boot camp process to see which one she would cast in, as her in her biopic, which apparently involved like having them do dance and sing and stuff like that. And some other names of people who apparently were involved in this were people like Sky Ferreira, Alexa Demi from Euphoria. I think Florence Pugh was rumored to at some point be
Mhm.
involved in the casting process, but I think she maybe declined the opportunity to take part of a boot camp when she's already a very famous, successful Oscar-nominated actress.
Probably was.
Would be my
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, it says Yahoo says it consisted of 11-hour choreography sessions.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
which is an absolutely insane thing to do, which ultimately makes me more excited for the movie because it's clearly like she clearly cares a lot about this happening, which is very funny to me.
Yeah.
Um, but Julia Garner was the person to win it, and I'm excited. I think she's a good actress. I think she's sort of got the look that's right for it, and she sort of got the attitude that's right for to play somebody as insanely confident as Madonna is.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I can actually kind of see that. I too am sort of curious about this movie in like a sort of morbid way. Not like, yeah, I mean, what are the Madonna directed movies? Like I remember the WE movie, which was about King Edward and Wallace Simpson. I can't even fathom what the other ones were. There's not many, right?
No, I think it's maybe only two, though she's also one of those people where like you can assume at a certain point any movie that she even was in, like she had a lot of
A
input,
little
I guess is how
outsized
you would
influence
put.
in, yeah. This one
Yeah.
is like
Fa-
all the way down the
yeah.
rabbit hole, though.
Yeah, this one is fully a product of her brain about her life, which is just crazy to think about. That I assume this was just like in the post Bohemian Rhapsody rush out of
uh,
to make a biopic out of every musician. Somebody just contacted her about her life rights, and she was just like, "Yeah, if you let me make it, I'll let you make a Madonna biopic."
yeah,
And they allowed her to do it. So more power to
I would
her.
be very pro this movie being like 3.5 hours long. Just like don't like leave any like crazy story unturned. Is how I would hopefully approach that. But
Yeah, listen, Madonna co-wrote it with Diablo Cody.
okay.
Um, it's just a lot of very funny people involved in that same film.
So hey, we'll see you there, Con 2025.
Well, not
It's
that far.
No,
it's totally the type of movie that
I
could,
totally believe it. Yeah. Maybe like you Max said, maybe not that far off, which even all the better for us. Um,
as someone who has recently can now say that I've watched every random blockbuster to have played at the Cannes Film Festival.
a lot of favors being done there, I'm assuming. So elsewhere, Max Nev Campbell is done with Scream. They had the movie that came out earlier this year. I think people seem to enjoy it, right?
Yeah, I think that people enjoyed it. I
She
think
did
what
not.
ultimately no, I think what it came down to is that the studio didn't value her as much as she wanted them to. It was due to contract
Okay.
negotiations.
So I didn't see the new Scream, so I'm not really sure where it leaves things story wise, but I guess they're going to need to right around that and continue presume well, I don't even want to presume anything because it could be getting into spoiler territory with various characters, but yeah, there'll be a new lead presumably in Scream 6.
I think they, from what I understand, John, and I haven't seen the new Scream either, is that they did attempt to try to transition
Okay,
away from the legacy cast. So maybe they could do it more
I think
organically.
the next one should just be called The Scream. We gotta, like some of these franchises have had to get really creative with their titling structures as they go on, and I think this one could do with a little bit of a shakeup on that front. But
They just need to call Vin Diesel.
yeah, well, he has, I'm sure, plenty of ideas. And then I'm not even going to pretend like I know anything about this, but critic Mac Patches eats a shoe. Either one of you want to take this?
Have you heard of this, Emilio?
I saw this on this agenda, and then I quickly went to Twitter to try and figure out exactly what it is.
So yes, the entertainment editor for Polygon, who I've worked with before, he made a bet like 10 years ago that there would never be a Top Gun 2, and if there was, he'd eat a shoe. And ever since like the movie was announced, and even through the delays, people were like, "Oh well, we just can't wait for you to eat a shoe." And um, he lived up to his promise. He ate a shoe in a video that he created. It's also hosted on Polygon, and it was hilarious. It includes like joke Top Gun music too. So if you're interested to see a movie critic live up to his bet, or just something funny due to Top Gun, look that up. Matt Patches eats a shoe. Top Gun.
There is, you may or may not know, a movie where Werner Herzog eats his shoe.
He references
Oh, okay,
that
sure, yeah,
in his
makes
video.
sense. I haven't seen either, but I hope that that all goes down okay for him. So with all that said, let's jump across the pond and talk a little about Con. And Emilio, I know you said this was your first time attending. Can you tell us a little bit about like the sort of context around what brought you there this year, and were you writing for a specific outlet, or were you kind of like covering things more on the fly?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess like to slightly introduce myself.
Sure, yeah, please. I apologize. We didn't
Yeah,
get
my
to that
name
up
is
front. We
yeah,
jumped right in.
yeah. But my name is Emilio Diaz. I am, I guess, a film podcaster. I guess how I would describe myself, from Puerto Rico. I host this podcast with a couple of friends of mine called "Can I Kick It," which
Which is
is
an awesome
about
title.
film
Yeah.
festival. Yeah, Cannes obviously spelled like the film festival, and I guess the city in France. I always call it the film festival, which is maybe rude to the city in France, but I might be rude to the city in France further in this segment. But yeah, we just talk about film festivals, and we talk about news and movies that play film festival, and we dive into history, and or just like do dumb little exercises like do fake juries about the blockbusters that have played Cannes in the past. Um, and I sort of did that podcast because me and my friends, we met at the 2018 Toronto Film Festival, and I've always had this fascination with Cannes from like a young age. And so we started this podcast in 2020, and obviously we've been covering Cannes from afar because none of us are like that professional film critics or like film commentators. And but this year I decided to just apply for the 3 days in Cannes program,
Mm.
which is sort of this program that Cannes Film Festival opened up, where if you are under the age of 28, I guess if you are between the ages of 18 and 28, you can apply, and they will allow you access to screenings at Cannes if you like write in an essay or like a cover letter and like describe why you want to attend. So I decided to do that, expecting to not really get accepted because I didn't know like what really their acceptance rate was. But I got in, and I decided to just take like an impromptu trip to Cannes, France, to just like finally satisfy all of my lifelong desires to head to there and to have stuff to talk about on my podcast. So
No, that's
That is
awesome. I
awesome.
mean, so many people wish they could go for something like that, and you only go around this world once, right? So, I'm so excited for you, Emilio, that you were able to take that trip and do it.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. I think it's a great lesson. If anyone's listening, just doesn't hurt to try something. You just never know sort of where it's going to take you, right?
yeah, so I immediately, one of the quickest things I learned after being like accepted, and then like talking to people who were also taking part of the program, because they sort of like provide like Facebook
Sure.
groups and
Yeah.
like chat groups for people who are attending, so they can maybe help each other out to attend, because I guess they like in their mind it's like a thing for like film students and people in that sort of ilk. You learn that they let in a lot of people.
Okay.
They maybe let in too many people enough that it makes it logistically difficult to let in these people to a lot of screenings,
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
boy.
which sort of made my trip to Cannes sort of weird in that I sort of went in with like the expectation of being able to watch a lot of movies, and then I kind of had to watch a little less than that. But I still got to watch a lot of stuff.
Yeah. What was the turnaround from when you got accepted to like when you actually had to fly out there?
A month.
Okay, so a little bit of time to prep, but still probably a whirlwind, right?
Yeah, it was like a month and like 2 weeks before I was like, no way I'm going to Cannes. We were just planning to do like the same, like from afar, like see what other people's reactions to stuff at Cannes
Mhm,
is,
mhm.
coverage that we usually do on our podcast. And then a week afterwards, I was like, you know what? I do actually have some money saved. I could maybe go to Cannes. Let me just apply to see if it works out. And then a week after that, it was like I got into Cannes, and I was like, I guess I'm going to Cannes. I guess I'm just gonna bite the bullet and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna figure out how to make this all happen.
Were your podcast co-hosts like just flipping out for you, like super excited?
Yeah, people were very excited for me. I mean, it's like when you host a podcast called Can I Kick It?
Yeah,
People are obviously aware of what your level of excitement or like your level of interest in this would be. So I had a lot of people like in my life reach out and be like, "I'm so excited for you. This is so insane,"
yeah,
which is like, it's like the both coins of like it's half like very good to receive that kind of encouragement, but also it does feel like it's weirdly putting a lot of
yeah.
pressure on a period of 3 days.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally get you. That's very valid. Okay, so cool. Let's talk a little bit about the festival itself, and it wrapped a little over a week ago now, as of our recording. The Palme d'Or, obviously the top prize at Cannes, went to Triangle of Sadness and its director Ruben Östlund. This is his second Palme d'Or. In a relatively short period. He won in 2017 for the movie The Square, which I think went on to win the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, but I don't remember. I could be wrong about
I don't think it
that. Okay,
did
my
actually.
mistake.
I don't think it did. That movie's like weirdly a lot in English, so I don't even
Oh, yeah, maybe
fully
he wasn't
know
even
if that like,
eligible.
yeah,
True.
maybe.
Nevertheless, second Palme d'Or is pretty impressive. For anybody, and especially to win two in like I said, a short period of time. One year that over this stretch there wasn't even a festival. So I think that's pretty cool. I think, at least for me, looking at that, like without knowing much about the movie, I think like okay, like it must be really good for them to sort of go in that direction versus something else from a filmmaker who is quote unquote more due or something like that. But that was the big winner. The Grand Prix, which is sort of the second prize, was split, and it went to director Lucas Don't for his movie Close, and Claire Denis for her film Stars at Noon. Um,
Both movies I've
both
seen.
movies that you've seen, beautiful. The Then it was sort of like a complicated awards structure. I feel like there was a lot of like things happening. They were trying to spread the wealth a little bit. Best director went to Park Chan Wook for his new movie Decision to Leave. And then there's the jury prize that let me see if I can get this right. There, it went to Belgian directors Charlotte van der Misha and Felix van Groeningen. Apologies if I butchered any names there. Their film El Auto Montagne, and then also another film, EO by Jerzy Skimolowski. They split the jury prize, and then there was also a special jury prize because this was the 75th edition of the film festival, and that went to Jean Pierre and Luc Dardin for Tori
Yeah.
and Lokita.
Yeah, I will say also, as somebody like who has become very familiar with how Cannes works, they will often just make up an award and give it to
I
something
feel like
like.
I vaguely
They,
remember that from like over the years, but this seemed like it was like particularly egregious. um,
I mean, they just like invent special Palme d'Ors to give to like Jean-Luc Godard all the
sure,
time. It's
sure.
like, yeah, it did seem like a particularly generous jury. I will say that I maybe will get into after you finish reading out all the awards.
Yeah. So those are sort of like the film, and I mentioned the best director. Then there was the acting awards. Best actor went to Song Kang Ho for playing in Hirokazu Koreeda's Broker. And he, I believe, is one of the stars of Parasite. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Tariq Saleh won the award for best screenplay for Boy from Heaven. And he was, I believe, a Egyptian filmmaker who was basically banned from working or living, maybe, or the film was banned, excuse me, from um, playing in Egypt for some quote unquote controversial politics, I guess. And then Best Actress was awarded to Zar Amir Abrahami for her role in Holy Spider. And I think that's all the main competition titles. Comrade d'Or went to War Pony, which is for Best First Feature Film. So that's kind of the awards, I guess. Emilio, what? Yeah,
John, if we pass it on to Amelia, we should say that they ended up picking French film star Vincent London, who starred in Titane and plenty of other
right.
feature films, as the jury president
I
this
think when
year.
we talked, we didn't do like a full con preview this year, but we talked a little bit about the competition a few episodes ago before, shortly after the titles were announced. And I think at the time there was no jury president or jury. Is it president or foreman? Captain?
It's the jury president.
Okay, I thought so. There was no jury president at the time, and yes, it was Vincent London
Yeah.
from Titan. So Emilio,
It seemed to be a chaotic picking process for the jury president, which I don't know
Yes.
if we want to get into that.
yeah, okay, let's do that because we could talk about the titles. But I'm curious, what's sort of the story there?
They seemed to pick it fairly late, and I think the big rumor was that. Oh, wait, and now I need to remember this person's
Because
name.
I know that there was like an
I
Oscar
thought
Farhadi thing, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the Asghar
Okay.
Farhadi. Yes, that is the name I was trying to pick. There was a big rumor that he was the person they were selecting for their jury president, which makes
Sure.
sense. He's a person who has won at Cannes many times. I mean, he's won prizes at Cannes many times. He's like a big, internationally recognized director, Oscar winner for best foreign film, all of that. But then, soon to when they would typically announce the jury president, a big scandal broke out in his native Iran, where he was being accused by a former, I think, student of his of plagiarizing the screenplay for his latest release movie, A Hero, from a script or story that she had written. And there were like multiple court cases and suits and countersuits about that. So I think the people presumed that Can just sort of got nervous and backed off, and they sort of were left in the wind about trying to pick a jury president. Rumors about them trying to just contact the most famous person possible to see if they would do it. And then they ended up at Vincent Lindon, who is a person who is who is like sort of on the like less famous side of jury presidents, I would say.
I mean I don't remember all the most recent ones off the top of my head, but just some from like the last decade that I can recall. They did Robert De Niro, Spike Lee. I believe Jane Campion did one, was a jury president. So I mean, like big names.
Yeah, Pedro Almodovar, the Coen brothers, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, like those are the sort of people who have been jury president the last decade.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And was Farhadi involved still in the jury at all?
Yeah.
Yes, he was a member of the jury.
I thought so. Yeah. I wanted to make sure about that before I said anything. Now, going over to some of their decisions, I mean, I know you were there for 3 days. You didn't see everything, but based off of both what you've seen and sort of what you were hearing, were you surprised by a lot of these? I mean, besides the made up ones, were you surprised by a lot of the awards, or did you sense that these are some of the directions the jury was going to go in?
Yeah, I guess like from a top down level, it was like you heard this both on the ground and from some of the reaction on Twitter that people thought it was not the best competition lineup in the
Okay.
history of the Cannes Film
Yeah.
Festival, to put it generally.
Okay.
People sort of thought it was a little lacking. So I think people were sort of left to figure out like what do they really award. It seems like people aren't that excited about that many things, so there were rumors about a bunch of different stuff winning, and I think Triangle of Sadness was sort of a last minute surprise winner, which rarely happens these days. It can, because if you're familiar with their award structure, is that like to the award ceremony they only invite people who are there to win an
Right.
award. So it's like usually by like 3 hours before, people sort of know who's gonna win the Palme d'Or. There's very few times is there like last minute entry like there was this year, where like every time something won an award, people were like, "Oh, I thought that might win the Palme d'Or." So
Okay.
why?
Okay. Interesting.
So it is weird that, and it's like Triangle of Sadness was sort of like last movie standing there, and it is weird because of the reasons you said. Because it's like Oslund won very recently for a movie that was apparently a controversial winner within like the jury group, according to rumors. People seem to like Triangle of Sadness at Cannes, but it's not like people were like over the moon with it. It seemed to get like the same reaction in a lot of stuff at Cannes, got at Cannes, which is like, this is pretty good, but we don't know if we like this as much as the director's previous
Okay.
work. Just for full disclosure's sake, I don't like The Square at all. I think it's a pretty bad movie. So I am, that is also maybe a reason why I'm more surprised by that win than some.
Oh, that's too bad. Ruben Östlund is one of my favorite directors going right now. I love his complicated
What
films
was the
on
one he did before that?
morals.
Was that Force Majeure?
Force
Yeah, I
Yeah.
Majeure.
liked that. I thought The Square was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen Force Majeure. I am certainly willing to believe that that is a good movie and that he's a good director. The Square is just a movie that weirdly rubbed me the wrong way. But just to go back, I think a thing you find out, like just like looking at competition lineups eventually, is it just every jury is different. It's hard to like pick out patterns in winning. Like it is true, like if they just thought that was the best movie and they thought they were lacking for options, that I think they are like more than fine to just pick that as their
Yeah.
winner. Even, and that it's like people, like different people who become jury presidents have a bunch of different like takes on what should win or not. I remember once talking to filmmaker Alex Ross Perry, who we had on our podcast, who talked about being like a jury member for a jury at the Locarno Film Festival, and he was like, people who say just the best movie should win are dumb. Like, what's the point of awards if not to highlight different things? And it's interesting that the Lindon jury took the complete opposite approach to that, of just like maybe awarding what they thought was the best movie from maybe the most famous filmmaker out of anybody there, depending on who you ask, like in modern times.
Yeah.
Well,
And also weird that they just awarded a lot of movies. Like there's
Yeah.
usually only one tie, and they gave out two ties, which is weird for a lineup that seemed lacking.
Yeah. Right.
well, Emilio, I'm desperate to hear about some of the films you saw, especially some of the stuff that was really buzzy over on the internet, from over on the crossette, if you will. And I heard that Close, the film that tied for second place, was um, thought to be the winner at some point, and then EO was a favorite of a lot of people on the ground there as well.
Yeah, I mean, EO made sense to me because EO is like the one movie that did seem to like, it's like the one movie that seemed to catch people off guard in terms of just how good it was and what it was doing. Like, if people don't know EO or haven't heard about EO, it sort of tells the tale of this donkey as he traverses Poland and like various owners, and sort of like suffers and delights at the hand of all of these different owners, and goes on this like sort of silent journey through the misery through the eyes of this animal, and has like a lot of very interesting director flourishes. I think it's a very good movie. Like that's a movie I'm excited for people to watch out of Cannes.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I told you guys before we started recording that I didn't know really anything about it. And as I was scanning like an article just to read more about the award winners before we started, all I read was the director Jerzy Skomolowski thanked his donkeys. So it's
Yes.
like, okay, interesting.
I mean, the crazy thing about EO is that it's a movie you watch and you're like, this donkey's giving a good performance. As crazy as that is to say, it's like there's moments in that movie where truly like something will happen on screen and you'll like the donkey will like look at it and then like make a face when I'm just like this did that donkey like act sad? Like I don't that's like not a thing that should be possible, but he did seem to get that performance out of those. I believe it was six
Six
donkeys
donkeys, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
who
and
played the one donkey in the film.
I think I had read that the director is actually like 87 years
Oh my
old,
God.
even though like some people thought it was like the work of like a new up and coming director or some.
Yeah, it was. I believe it was the story. A story one of the jury members told, where they were like, where they said another jury member saw EO, and they were like, "Wow, what like a bold new vision from like who's like this shining new voice in cinema." And then they had to be like, "This guy is like an 80-year-old pro from Poland who's been making movies for like 50 years. He's just like still exciting."
It's
Which to be fair, I am not super familiar with his previous films, but he does come very highly regarded.
okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with him at all, actually. But yeah, very curious about this one. It sounds a little bit like the
Yeah.
what's the Robert Bresson movie?
Yes,
Oh,
all
sorry. Yes.
Hazard
Yes, that's it.
Bavasard.
Yeah. Does it sort of feel a little bit like that?
I have not seen
Okay.
Oh Hassan Barba's Heart to just like to put that up front, but it does like the comparisons do seem to be there about just like these movies about how about just like donkeys and suffering through
Yeah.
them. So it's like very like it's like weirdly hardcore. It does have some violence in it. There's like a lot of use of just like bright red flashing color, heavy metal
Okay.
music, just a lot of like stuff like that.
Not
For
what I
anybody
expect from a
who
donkey
No.
film.
no, it's very he's a very interesting director. I believe one of his previous films, Deep End, I believe David Lynch has called it his favorite color
Oh my
film.
God.
So he's a guy who's like like people in the know really mess with.
Okay. Very interesting. I mean, that's definitely. Now, do you know? Not to put you too much on the spot on like acquisitions, but do you know anything about EO getting picked up by a studio, and if that's going to be something we see in 2022?
EO did get picked up by somebody. I'm trying to remember who. Got picked up by Janus Films.
Oh,
That
okay.
is who
Very
picked
cool.
it up.
So
Yeah. So
potentially Criterion release one day.
yeah, potentially a Criterion release. Obviously, EO like hot of the immense success of them picking up Drive My Car at Cannes last year.
Yeah,
So
that was a sharp one. Okay, well that's cool. That's something I'm definitely excited about. Close then was another movie you saw that won an award. It was one of the split Grand Prix winners. The only thing I know about this movie is that I think the director's previous movie was that movie Girl, which was I think premiered at Cannes in Un Certain Regard category. I think maybe it won an award there, and it was very controversial because it was about transgender issues, and it cast a cis man in a role that maybe was not appropriate, and there was a lot of like publicity around that.
Well, I think this is a very young director too, right? He's almost
yeah,
like a wunderkind, like Xavier Dolan.
Girl was his first movie,
He's
and this
Belgian.
is his second movie. He is
Yeah.
Belgian. Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about
Um.
Close and sort of what that's about? And it sounds like the reception to that was pretty strong overall. If it was, I mean, if it tied for second and was buzzed about as a potential Palme d'Or winner.
Yeah. I mean, Max briefly just like snuck Xavier Dolan in there like really quickly, and he is a person he does remind me of
Sure.
in terms of just making very loud melodramas. But it's just like it's weird to say, but I almost prefer Xavier David Dolan's movies. I really did not like Close. I think it's a very bad movie. I think it is like to briefly go into what it's about, which is difficult because it's like a movie that has like a 20-minute in twist
Oh,
that it sort of defines what the movie's about, but it is sort of about these two young kids in Belgium. I'd assume they're like around like 11, like 10 to 12 years old, who are like, they're like two male best friends, and they are extremely close, as the title of the movie would
Okay.
suggest. And they are close to a degree where they make, I guess, they're like grade school classmates uncomfortable, where they like sleep on each other's stomachs and they like hold hands to go to school and stuff like that. And the movie is sort of about those kids struggling through other people calling them out on how close their relationship is. And yeah, I just found it to be a sort of like extremely like emotionally manipulative triggly mess. I don't know. I don't like being very mean to movies, but it is not a movie I have a lot of nice things to say about, I guess.
I mean, that's totally fine. I think, uh, movies that I agree with you. Sometimes I have a hard time like saying bad things about movies, but I think in the context of something that's like winning really prestigious international awards and presumably going to get fairly noticeable release internationally, that it's okay to be honest about it. It's going to probably do okay regardless.
Yeah, this one got picked up by 24,
Okay,
so
well there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think it was about the movie that people seem to respond to?
I just think it's like a movie that is every single second of it is trying to exist at like this like very emotionally involving sweeping level where like every shot is like the most dynamic thing it's trying to be. The score is like always
Uh-huh.
swelling. It's like very like it's like very obviously trying to make points about like society and the and like the way we live today. And I think that's I think I sort of wrote this in a piece that it might come out later this week that I wrote for a site called Dim the House Lights, where I think Cannes tends to respond to very loud movies, and I think they struggle with quieter stuff. And I think this is the sort of thing that very much would engage a Cannes crowd in a way that, when just watched normally at home, you might be sort of more befuddled by everything that it's trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it was also. I mean, you could imagine that, like, if it contrasts in that respect with a lot of the other titles going on, that it just stands out more. But
Yeah, and I think in a Can that certainly was lacking for exciting. I think a lot of people were looking for something to get attached to and swept up by,
yeah,
and I think Close premiered late toward the festival and sort of provided people an outlet for that wanting excitement.
sure, makes sense.
John, if we're talking about acquisitions, I just wanted to say that Triangle of Sadness was acquired by Neon.
Yes. Okay.
So
Yeah, I saw that as well. So very good call out there.
Last three Palme d'Or winners, all neon.
Oh
yeah.
wow, that's notable. So a couple other kind of bigger titles that I know you caught up with. One which just released in theaters, at least limited release in the United States, is David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that movie? And one of the things I'm kind of curious about is Cronenberg, bigger name for sure among some of the other directors in competition. Um, what is it about the film do you think that made it go home empty-handed?
For all the marketing that's talking about how surgery is the new sex and just how intense it is and how it just like how forward, and they're really trying to sell you on the like old Cronenbergy, like you won't believe all of the stuff that's in this movie about it. It's sort of like a weirdly quiet, just like very contemplative movie. It's like sort of just like this sad meditation about like, I guess, whether or not the kids have gone too far, I guess, is sort of like what you can extrapolate from it metaphorically. Like Viggo Mortensen sort of plays this tortured artist who is just like a guy who is growing new organs within his body,
As you
and
do.
as you do, and Leia Seydoux is his sort of partner who sort of extracts these organs from his body, and they sort of do this within like theaters, and they do it as like this art installation performance, and it's sort of their art that they are recognized for. It's just like growing and removing of organs, and they talk about how it's sort of like these experimental art pieces about like the distortion of the human body, and it's like very obvious that he's trying to make that Cronenberg is sort of trying to make an analogy to himself, and then all of these other people in the world sort of try to present themselves as other people who are experimenting in this form, but are like taking it farther, or like trying to regulate it in some form, or like trying to push it in different new directions. Again, it's sort of mostly just these collection of sad conversations that Vigo is having in between all of these very gnarly surgery scenes about how, yeah, about like whether the new way of doing this is sort of robbing this art form of its integrity, or like the way that he's mutilating his body comes from like pathos and realness, and he doesn't know if the next generation is doing that in that sort of way. And it sort of gets into like climate change and like generational generational differences, and it's sort of like a weirdly funny movie. A lot of people are giving are giving very like crazy, intense, quirky performances, like Kristen Stewart, who's giving a performance unlike I've seen most people on screen ever give.
Uh,
And I think it's a movie that's just operating on a lot of levels. It's a movie that when I watched it first, I was sort of cold on, because it sort of felt like a movie that's for like the real Cronenberg heads, of just like if you're a person who's like obsessed with him and like the way he thinks about his own art, especially in his old age. And but sort of the more I've thought about it, I've been like, I should watch it again because I think I would really like it, because I think it is like a very intelligent and like weirdly funny sad movie.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that you're cold on it at first, because I was sort of reading between the lines as you were describing it and thinking that you really, really dug it. Um, but I know the feeling of sort of being curious about something, but maybe feeling like it's keeping you at arm's length. And just the more that you dwell on it, like even without necessarily seeing it a second time, you're embracing it. And sometimes when that repeat viewing comes, it like solidifies those feelings afterwards. So I am not like a big Cronenberg guy. So I don't know what that's going to mean for me watching this movie. I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to see it, but yeah, I'm curious about it. I mean, it looks interesting. You made it sound very interesting, but I know that I'm going to have my eyes between my hands a lot, and also maybe it's just going to be tearing my hair out and going crazy over some of the more contemplative stuff. But Max, like, what is sort of your temperature on Crimes of the Future at the moment after after we learn more about it?
Yeah, I was interested in learning more about Cronenberg. I'm not the biggest admirer of his films either. I'm probably more familiar with his stuff like History of Violence and Eastern
Sure, yeah,
Promises,
same.
which is not really his traditional
That was
body
him like
horror.
shifting.
Yes. So Crimes of the Future, I don't really like surgery in movies at all. So I don't know when I'm
I don't
gonna
like
get to
surgery
watch
out of
this
movies
one.
for the record either.
Yeah, no.
We'll see. I mean, it's something I'm sure we're going to talk about in some capacity. For me, it's probably a movie I'm going to watch at home, just to be honest with you,
Yeah, yeah.
because I need to be able to step away. I need to be able to turn it off. I'm really struggling to get through it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but that's also I think what I was trying to communicate is that I think it's being sold on like an intensity level that I
oh,
don't
that's
think the
not
movie
accurate.
really
Yeah,
like exists at. Like there is gross stuff for sure. I'm not going to
yeah,
downplay that. There are surgery scenes, but I think the movie is rarely treating it as like, wow, this is gnarly, like close your eyes, this is so gory. It's
sure.
like
That it's like
it is
a
weirdly like
propulsive type
like
movie, or something like that. It's more
no.
just sedentary.
Yeah, it is a very set. It's like the world is like weirdly cold and empty, and in like in a way that it's commenting on. Obviously,
Sure.
this is not just like he made a cheap movie. This is it's like about how the world is sort of a cold and empty place, and sort of being sad about the state the world might be going
Yeah, that
in.
sounds interesting to
But
me. Yeah.
yeah, it's like 80% just like room tone conversations, and then 20% very like gross looking surgery stuff.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
I'd say the grossest thing in it is not it's not even a thing that is like surgery or gory, really. I will say.
Okay. So that's Crimes of the Future. You can check that out if you're in, I guess, a select city, whatever select cities those are, presumably New York and LA, but I'm not sure if it's a little bit wider than that yet.
Aren't they
Yeah.
always?
Yeah, it is. I think it's in
Oh, what are you
Boston.
doing, Max? Get out there.
Frequent guest of the podcast, Charlie Nash. I think says it's at the
Okay,
Coolidge
beautiful.
in Boston.
Okay. So yeah, you could check it out a little bit wider than that. I am not the biggest David Cronenberg fan. I am a very very big James Gray fan. And so I've held on to this one long enough, but I really want to hear about Armageddon Time.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested what you like about like what are your favorite James Gray movies and what do you like about them?
Well, I mean, I really like most of the ones I've seen. I would say like the ones that kind of like jump out the most. I mean, Ad Astra to me was like a spectacle, like that I just adored. I don't know that it was like the most James Gray movie of his like filmography, certainly thematically, but it being in outer space was a little bit bizarre to me. But like We Own the Night is something that like I really, really, really love. And again, it has the themes that I kind of look for that I think he speaks to really well, like repetitively so perhaps, but it's set as like this like 70s throwback crime drama, which I really enjoy. So that's to me is like kind of like my go-to James Gray movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say that the qualities in which it shares with We Own the Night is that they're both like very like crisp, like wet New York movies. They both have like they're like there's like some textural similarities between both of those movies. Armageddon Time is good. Armageddon Time is a weird movie where I might like sort of like Crimes of the Future, where like I think if I like sat down and saw it again, I might think it was great. Right now, I just sort of think it's like very good with some good elements and some elements that I'm more mixed on. Uh, the movie is sort of like autobiographically about himself. It's sort of himself as a kid.
Yeah, similar to what we've seen in like Belfast and Roma, right? But
yeah,
this one,
I have sort of jokingly referred to this movie as the Champagne of Belfast to some friends of mine. And it's sort of about this kid's like he is sort of from like an upper middle class upbringing. Well, I guess you could call it an upper class upbringing, and he is like in public school and he's a troublemaker and he becomes friends with this African American kid, and it's sort of about his realizations as that like they're both troublemakers, but his friend gets in a lot more trouble than he is, and then eventually he is pulled out of the school and brought to a bigger private school in New York whose big like donators and people who are involved with the funding and like activity organization are the Trump family. I don't know if you've heard about them. Some members of which are played by famous Hollywood actors in the film.
Okay.
And it's sort of just this movie. I guess the way I would talk about this movie is that I often feel with like the Romas and Belfast of the world, those movies have an issue where the main character is just sort of this like POV vehicle where they just exist to sort of like look at the world and sort of just be like, I remember when this was when I was a kid and like look at all these people around me living their lives. And
both of those movies, as we've talked about ad nauseum on the podcast over the years, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Armageddon Time sidesteps that because James Gray is sort of too sincere a filmmaker and too like self-critical of person to not view that character with a bunch of like weird guilt and contemplation about like his own white privilege and like his sort of upbringing and the sort of like the benefits he's had with his upbringing and also how he feels super disconnected to all of the people at his second school and just sort of the weird relationship with his family. I think I think it's a lot better than those movies at that, and I think it like has a center and it has a heart and it has like a brain to it, which I really appreciate about it. I think the place where it stumbles similarly to those movies is that a lot of time is that I think a thing you find when you watch all of these movies is just like, I guess a lot of people just grew up the same. Where there's stuff where it's like it's interesting to recognize aspects of your own life in other people's lives, but also it's like, yeah, I get it. Like sometimes your dad's like a dick, and
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
your mom like wants the best for you, but it's like can't do it or whatever. And I think the Trump stuff gets a little like heavy-handed
That
occasionally. It
sounds
gets like a little
bizarre
like
as hell.
it gets I guess people have talked about it, but at one
Okay.
point Jessica Chastain
Oh,
pops up and
Jesus.
gives a speech, and she plays, I guess, Donald Trump's older
Oh my
sister,
God. That sounds
and she gives.
wild.
It's a very. I got asked by somebody whether that's a good performance, and I like was quiet for like 30 seconds, and I was like, I guess it's a good performance. I don't know if that character needs to be in here, but she's certainly committed to doing that. But overall, I think the movie's good. I think the like its supporting cast is pretty good. Anthony Hopkins is in it as like as like the main kid's grandfather. He's like pretty charming and like light throughout it. The movie maybe leans on him too much to be like the magical old granddad
Yeah,
who knows
that character
everything.
annoys me.
But he's like charming enough. Jeremy Strong, who's not an actor I particularly like, I think gives like a weirdly great performance in it,
Okay.
where he is the kid's dad, and he's weirdly doing like a Ray Romano voice. He like
Okay.
sounds a lot like Ray Romano, but there's like a lot of like internal like sadness and anger buried in that character that I think is like very accurate to like that sort of type of dad and the sort of guy he is, that I think he captures really well. And I think he has like two very good scenes with the kid. Anne Hathaway's pretty good. The main two kids, I think they're like pretty good for child performances. I don't know if they're good performances in a
Yeah.
vacuum, but they're like good enough to carry you through.
Okay. Yeah, you say like
I,
three things about the movie where I'm like, oh my God, I'm just gonna like love this, and then one thing where I'm just like, huh.
that's sort of how I feel about the movie, where it's like I go like scene for scene. I'm like, this is a charming scene. This looks good. This is a charming scene. This looks good. And then there's stuff where I'm like, I don't know if I would have put
Yeah.
that in there. But like James Gray is just like such a sincere person that I can see him being like, this needs to be in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, sure.
So I sort of give him the space. That's like sort of always been the thing about James Gray, where he's like sort of like weirdly too sincere and honest to like ever be the sort of like Scorsese filmmaker that some of his movies
I think
promise.
that people wanted, yeah, really early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but which is and that's sort of like his weakness and his superpower of just like being and like an exceedingly like sort of like serious minded
I think
person.
I appreciate that because it's that thing you describe where it's reflective, but not in like a everything's rosy sort of way.
Yeah, I mean that's like a lot of like Ad Astra, I think with it, it's like a largely liked movie, but like a lot of the people who have issues with it are like, this guy's in Neptune and he keeps just monologuing about how sad he is about his dad. Where it's just like,
That's fair, I guess, but it's also part of what I like about it.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just like a classic thing where it's like, if you're in for it, you're gonna
Yeah,
love it,
yeah.
and if you're not, it's gonna drive you
I'm
insane.
probably gonna dig it, but we'll talk about it soon enough. I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if you guys know off the top of your head. It's distributor or plans.
Focus
Focus
features.
features. Okay, so they're gonna go for it
I looked it
probably.
up. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So
Yeah, I would expect it. I guess it's like it could go in a lot of different ways, but I would expect it to be at like a TIFF, like at a
yeah, yeah, I
Toronto,
would.
like it to do like the full festival gauntlet before like maybe trying to do a awardsy release.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Especially with when you say it's focus. I know have a bit of a hard stop coming up relatively soon, and we have a few things to get to. So I want to give you a chance, Emilio, to just maybe pick out like one more movie on kind of the list of things you saw that you might like to discuss a bit.
Uh, so I'll mention two things
Okay.
quickly. One of them is The Stars at
Uh-huh.
Noon, which is a new Claire Denis movie. It's an A24 movie tied with Close for the Grand Prix, which is a very weird movie. I don't know how big of Claire Denis heads either of you
I
are.
would say like a little bit too uninformed to say either way.
Yeah, I've only seen like 3 or 4 of her movies.
Yeah, so I really love Claire Denis. I think she's like one of the more interesting filmmakers alive. She is like an acquired taste by like any definition. Obviously, she makes movies that sometimes are like very cold, and I would describe them as hypnotic. Other people would call them as very sleepy and sparse. Um, the weird thing about The Stars at Noon is that it really isn't that. It's sort of kind of a straightforward thriller in a way that's very weird from her. It's like some people have made like the like Miami Vice Michael Manny comparisons, which I think are apt to a certain extent. It sort of reminds me of some of the like more sparse Soderbergh work. It's sort of this movie about Margaret Qualley plays this American journalist trapped in Nicaragua who is like trying to leave the country, but she's facing a lot of pressure from like government officials and like CIA agents and a lot of stuff. So it's she's sort of trying to like hustle her way outward to the point where she meets like this like British construction company employee who played by
Taylor Swift's boyfriend.
Joe
Taylor
Alwyn.
Swift's boyfriend Joe Alwyn, and they sort of like get entangled in a sort of romance and try to run away from the country. And I think it's pretty good as just like a straightforward thriller. It reminds me of a movie that came out last year to a similar muted response, which is Beckett, which is a movie starring John David Washington and Alicia Vikander, which is also about John David Washington trying to leave like Greece
Right.
amid a lot
Yeah,
of
I
pressure.
remember that movie coming out and like kind of forgetting about it. I didn't even see it, but it's just like, oh, that sounds interesting, and then
That
never saw it.
yeah, that's a classic movie that most critics were like, this isn't very good, and then I just was like, I guess this isn't very good, and then one of my co-hosts on the podcast saw it and was just like, this movie's actually great, you should watch it, and I saw it, and I was like, this movie's pretty
Okay.
good, like I think it's worth
Yeah.
watching, and I think like The Stars of Noon is sort of like that, where it's a movie that I think taken ungenerously seems a little like cold and like not very exciting given its premise, but I think it's doing a lot of interesting stuff. It is just weird to me that it is not very Claire Denis, when she's mostly been like a pretty uncompromising filmmaker. To see her go this normal is sort of
Yeah,
weird.
that's interesting. And that this is the title that sort of, I guess you could say, she breaks through finally at Cannes.
Yeah, she had a very weird
I
relationship
know.
with Can
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I cannot get into at this time because it will take too much time to to describe. But I guess another female French director who has had a weird relationship with being in competition at Cannes is Mian Hansen Love,
Yeah.
whose new movie One Fine Morning is I think by far the best thing I saw at
Oh,
Cannes, and I think
cool.
an extremely excellent, just like low key charmer of a movie.
Okay, that's awesome. I am a big fan of hers as well. And I must have even missed. Was this title in competition?
No.
Okay, that's
No,
why
it was
I guess
at
it's
Director's
okay.
Fortnight. Weirdly, I think controversially, people were like,
Yeah, well, there you go.
there aren't that many French movies in competition, and there aren't that many movies directed by women in competition, and you let what I think is like maybe one of the best filmmakers alive just like
Yeah, it's
slide
not
out
like she
into
doesn't
Director's
have
Fortnight.
credentials, right?
Bergman Island was at competition at Cannes last year.
I loved Bergman Island so much.
Yeah.
John, before we switch off of Cannes, I want to say 2 movies that I'm excited to see that were buzzed about on Twitter. One is called After Sun, and that one has been picked up by A24 and stars Normal People's Paul Mescal. I guess they're saying he's a breakthrough performance in this movie, and was hearing a lot of great buzz for that. And the one that's more recognizable is Moon Age Daydream, is the David Bowie documentary by the director of Jane, Brett Morgan. And I love David Bowie. I'm really looking forward to seeing that come out, and that's going to be distributed by Neon.
Okay, very cool, very cool. Any other last minute mentions you want to get out there, Emilio, about the festival?
No, I mean, very weird experience being there.
Yeah, I
I
guess
will
bigger
say,
picture, sort of. Yeah, it was surreal.
it was extremely surreal. There were so many people
Yeah.
there. It was extremely packed. It's one of those things. This is again. I will have a piece up where I go more into my feelings about the whole thing. But it is sort of a place where you from the outside, I thought I was gonna go to a place where it's like, oh, so this is gonna be like 50% people here just for like the buzz and glamour, and then like 50% people here for like the film festival, and then you get there and you find out it's like 90% of the people there are for the glitz and the glamour, and 10% of the people are there for to actually like watch and talk about
As
movies,
I
which is
honestly,
a very
when you were going there, I thought you were going to say the opposite.
no, no, no,
I
no,
don't
no,
know
no.
why.
It is
That's wild.
it is just it is mostly a destination place for
I guess
rich
so.
French and European people, and then secondarily a place where they're showing a lot of very cool, interesting movies.
Okay. Well, good to know, I guess. I'm glad you got there. I hope it didn't like take the shine off too much. But yeah,
No,
yeah. At the very least, you got to see what sounds like some pretty cool movies. And we'll all be jealous of you for the next few months until we get to check out some of them at least. So thank you for sharing your experience with us. We'll do a quick what we've been watching in a few minutes, but before we do that, we want to let you know how you can follow and keep up with us. Emilio, can you tell people like where you're at on social media and any like, I know you already mentioned your podcast, but like any other websites or anything you want to mention?
you can follow me at I'm Laugh Alone on Twitter. I am the word laugh, the word alone all together. You can follow me on Letterboxd at I Laugh Alone. Someday I will get those two things to be the same thing. Today is not that day. The day that's, I guess, if any listeners out there has into whoever has the at I Laugh Alone Twitter account, hit me up.
Yeah.
Let me know if they're willing to part with it, because I would like to just be on a podcast and say that those are the same thing.
Fair enough.
My podcast is called Can I Kick It? We talk about film festivals. We do a lot of fun, interesting, goofy stuff. We try to talk about very like highbrow art house movies in a way that's hopefully accessible and fun. Uh, when is this podcast coming out?
Probably tomorrow.
Yeah, this week.
Oh, okay. So the episode that comes out the day after this episode, this podcast comes out, we will be doing a jury where we are awarding Cannes style all of the weird blockbusters that played in Cannes during the 1980s with our guest David Sims. Hopefully, I think that would be a fun episode if you're trying to check out our podcast for the first
That sounds
time.
very fun.
We recorded it yesterday, and it was very fun.
Cool.
I think that's everything I want to plug. As I said earlier, I think I will have a piece up on Dim the House Lights later this week, but who knows?
David Sims
Keep
is
an
one of
eye
my
out.
heroes.
Yeah,
As everybody who knows
I mean,
listens to this knows.
I mean, I guess like to make the long story short, the reason me and my co-host met was because we were part of a blank check Discord group where we all met and became friends and
Oh,
decided
cool.
to go to Toronto
Oh, that's so
together,
fun.
and then met David, and then David has sort of become sort of our like
Patron
weird
saint.
friend slash patron saint like mentor figure for our podcast, and he's been very fun to have on multiple times. We also did the blockbusters that played the 2010s with him. His co-host Griffin Newman has been on a couple of times to do the 2000s blockbusters and also to talk about Annette. Um, for people who are fans of those people or people who are fans of this podcast, I think you would like Can I Kick It?
That's very cool. I will say I love that you incorporated the word "can" into your podcast title. One of my favorite things I ever wrote was an article. I think I wrote it in like 2013, and it was called "The Best and Worst Can Openers." And it was just all the like great titles that opened the festival and the weirdest ones where you're just like, I cannot believe they opened their festival with that. And I just was always so proud of coming up with that pun.
I have certainly joked many times that our title is maybe the best part of our podcast, but you know, it's a great title, so it does leave the podcast a lot of room to be actually good.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's a high bar, but
and it's truly one of those things where it's like it's probably the only title it could have ever been. I think at one point we were like, if the Cannes Film Festival like stops happening or gets canceled or sues us one day, we'd switch to Fest I Ever Had just to keep it on like rap song titles.
Yeah, that's fair.
But That's all we really have.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Cool. Anything else you wanted to sort of plug while we're here?
Not really.
Okay.
I think that's
Totally
everything.
fair. No pressure there. For Max and I, you can follow our podcast on Twitter at It's the Pick Pod, and Max, you're at.
MH
You can
Colville.
also like us on Facebook at It's the Pictures, and you can send us an email at itsthepictures@gmail.com. Let us know some of the titles you are excited about from this year's Cannes Film Festival. Let us know who you think Madonna should play in Joker 2. And if you have like a favorite sneaker brand that you'd like Max or I to try to eat sometime in the future as the result of a ill-fated bet, then we're open to suggestions. Maybe Matt Patches should reach out and give us some flavor recommendations. You can also follow us on Letterboxd. Just search for It's the Pictures and keep up with what we've been watching. And finally, you can subscribe to our newsletter at itsthepictures.substack.com. And Max, why don't you talk a little bit about what you've written about lately?
Yeah, so I received a copy of Mississippi Masala from Criterion, and I was very eager to watch it. I guess it was in the early '90s the film came out, and I just never really got on my radar. It's by the director Mira Neer, who did Queen of Catway and Monsoon Wedding. So I really enjoy those movies as well. And I was just pleasantly surprised by Mississippi Masala. And if you want to read more on my thoughts on it, it's on the newsletter. Also, I got a copy of The Untouchables from Paramount. And it was my first time ever watching The Untouchables. It was a long time blind spot for me. And
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I never knew you didn't see that. We need to do a
yeah,
De Palma episode sometime because I feel like you have some De Palma catching up to do.
yeah. I mean, like I've seen
He's made a
I've
lot
seen
of
I
movies. To
know.
be
Well,
fair,
that is fair, but
I've seen
I've
like
wa- I've
Phantom of the
I've watched like 8
Paradise.
of them and like love all of them, and I'm still like I haven't watched half of them.
I've seen about half, and I would love to see the other half, but I think we've like tiptoed around it a few times in the past, and I think it's something you would probably enjoy, Max, if you
Well,
had caught up a few others.
it's funny because I had heard mixed things about the Untouchables. Like some people really love it and think it's like
Yeah.
iconic, and other people are just like it's fine. I was more on the it's fine
Oh.
chapter of the Untouchables. I thought that Sean Connery was probably the best part. He brings the heart to that movie. Yeah, the Untouchables. I also, outside of all that, I recently had a TV review published at Paste Magazine for the new Irma Vep HBO series. It's Olivier Assayas's remake slash sequel of his earlier film with his ex-wife Maggie Chung, and this one is very meta. Like I said, it's some parts sequel, some parts remake. It stars Alicia Vikander, and it's very interesting and worth checking out.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
definitely interested.
I'm very excited. I like only watched the original Irma Vep recently and was a big fan. I'm a fan of a lot of Asayasa's work.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting to me. Just kind of came on my radar recently, and I was like, okay, that seems like something I really should be keeping up with. So glad to hear it. Let's do a quick what we've been watching, and yeah.
John, I did drop this one note. I just want to recognize it. We said we didn't want to say obituaries on the show, but
Yeah.
Ray Liotta passed away between the
Good
last
call.
episode
Yeah,
we did.
it's been a little while since this occurred as of our recording, but I'm glad you got a chance to mention that before we moved on here. But yeah, that was sad to see. I think he was in his late 60s.
Yes, it was a very sudden passing.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I
And,
mean, obviously, a lot of people shout out his performance in Goodfellas, and for good reason. It's so crucial to that movie, which is one of the best director's best movies, right? I thought, I mean, he was great all the way up till No Sudden Move last year, which was one of my favorite movies of 2021. And I thought he really killed it in about 5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, apparently is one of his last roles is a new TV miniseries for Apple TV called Blackbird, where he starred opposite Taron Egerton, who played
Oh,
Elton
Elton
John
John, yeah.
in Rocket
Okay,
Man.
cool. Well, thanks for mentioning that. Sorry to hear about the passing of Ray Liotta, a really great actor and somebody who I was always excited to see in really anything he appeared in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great in Something Wild.
Oh yeah,
A great movie.
absolutely.
That is he's tremendous in.
Um,
That is sort of my like the thing I point to with Ray Liotta always.
yeah, no, that's a great call. Great call. What we've been watching lately, Emilio, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I always do weirdly in what we've been watching lately type segments because I am a person that apart from whatever I'm doing for like the podcast, I try to like decompress rather than just like consume a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. But I do just there are like 3 television shows I ever watch, and Barry is one of them because I really love Barry, and I think it's like a tremendously made television show. I think it's really sort of pushing a lot of buttons this season with how far it's going and making a lot of its characters like putting them in tense situations and like sort of casting them in a villainous light. But it like the filmmaking is tremendous. Like I like if there's anybody on planet Earth who I would be excited to see make a feature, it would be Bill
Yeah,
Hader, who I
I'd
think
be
is
super
like
excited about that.
he's like a weirdly an incredible filmmaker given just like his work on Barry and just like how expressive and interesting his taste seems to
He has
be.
such
Like
like
he
a
had a
depth of film knowledge.
yeah, like recently he on his he on an interview shouted out Roy Anderson, who is like
Mm,
a kind of like a kind of obscure Swedish director who I love and I've seen his movie at TIFF,
hmm
and it's just so weird to see like an SNL comedian making an HBO show shout out that kind of a person and his influences for making it sort of like weird dramedy. He's just like a very smart, talented guy, and I wish him all the best. And that Barry's great, and people should watch it.
we're in the third season of Barry, am I right? Because I don't actually follow the
Yes,
show, and I know I should. So, guilty
I,
conscience
I,
here,
I
yeah,
but
I actually almost caught up the third season was coming out. I had heard so many good things about it, and it's a half an hour dark comedy show, so it's very easy to catch up to season 3. I'm actually I think 2 episodes into season 2 myself. Um, I I think it's a wonderful show too.
cool. Yeah, it's
yeah.
definitely something.
Great performance by Henry
Very Winkler,
Winkler.
yeah.
Just an incredible performance.
Cool, very good. Glad you're enjoying that show. Max, you've got a few other shows that you've been keeping up with, yeah?
Yeah, so I've seen the summer blockbusters from Disney,
Right,
right?
which are now on
Um,
TV.
Yeah, the blockbusters are now on TV. I've seen the first 4 episodes of Obi-Wan. The 4th episode aired today, the day that we're recording, and it expands upon the story of Obi-Wan. You know, between when we last saw him in the 3rd prequel movie and when we eventually see him again in A New Hope. Um, this one has him playing the typical role of a Star Wars protagonist and having a young ward that he has to look after. This time, um, small spoilers for Obi-Wan. This time, it's a young Princess Leia that he's shepherding around and trying to protect. Overall, it's pretty good. Just like most of these Star Wars shows have been pretty good. That's what to expect from that. Ms. Marvel premiered today. I saw the first 2 episodes of that. I think just the premiere happened. I actually like that show as a just a teen drama show as opposed to a superhero show. I think it does a lot of interesting things in that realm. Maybe not a great superhero show otherwise. But really, what I want to talk about is For All Mankind. The 3rd season is about to air on Apple TV Plus, and I've also been trying to catch up with that. I've watched the entire first season and the first 4 episodes of season 2. Um, that is really cool series. That's like an alternate space race series. It begins with what if Russia beat the United States to the moon, and quickly changes history. The 4th episode introduces the idea of women astronauts and having the first women astronauts on the moon, something that the United States has not done as of 2022. So it's a different take on the space race, and I've said multiple times that I really like space travel movies and such, and this one really scratches an itch for me.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Lots of TV shows going on around, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's so much TV.
I know. It's exhausting. I most recently have caught up with rewatch of Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, which of course won the Palme d'Or back in 2011, I think. And I hadn't seen the movie in a few years. I think this is like my 4th time or so watching it.
Did you watch the theatrical cut or the new extended
I
cut?
watched the
That's on
theatrical
Criterion?
cut. I've seen the extend. I watched the extended cut like right when it came out on Criterion, and that was the last time I've seen the movie. But I was pulled for whatever reason to watching the theatrical cut. And I actually might write something about this, so I don't want to say too much about it. I haven't written anything in a little bit.
You can always write for the.
You
can write for the
I
newsletter.
might be doing that. But yeah, it was a really powerful experience. I think I've always really liked this movie a lot. Like, I mean, I've loved this movie, but there's things about it where I'm just like, okay, maybe we could have figured something out here and not have Sean Penn twirling on the beach for as much as he is. But I think overall, like, it solidified just some feelings I have about like what it's really trying to say in a way that I found really just powerful personally. And so I was glad to rewatch it. I think it holds up really well. I don't think that like his kind of I guess let's say checkered output since then, at least in my opinion, hampers how good this movie is. So it was a great rewatch, and I would definitely recommend it if certainly if you haven't seen it. I think everybody should check it out who's listening an hour and a half into a movie podcast. But if you haven't seen it in a long time and haven't thought about it, give it a look. It's I think a great director's probably best work.
All right, cool.
So that's I think gonna do it for us. Emilio, thank you so much for coming on. This is really fun. Really appreciated your time and all your expertise on this year's Cannes movies, and definitely recommend people check out Can I Kick It or Can We Kick It?
Can I kick
Sorry. Can I definitely check out Can I Kick It?
Don't worry.
And thank you again, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.